Exerting influence. Exerting influence is another very important part of developing negotiation skills. What happens when we exert influence? Now, do not misunderstand this exerting influence to forcefully asking or pushing someone to do something. It is more of a tactful way of exerting your point of view over what they actually think at this point in time. The very first thing we need to do while exerting influence is to affirm beliefs. Say, for example, you and I are having this conversation. The moment I start affirming what you believe in, immediately your walls drop down. You're more open to having this conversation with me, because affirming beliefs shows similarity. We are similar, we think the same way. This immediately makes the other person comfortable. So affirming beliefs is the first step that we have to take in order to ensure that we get the other person to agreeing with us and we're able to exert more influence. After we have affirmed their beliefs, what we can then do is inspire them to modify their beliefs. Now, what happens when we try and modify their beliefs is that we're trying to get them to agree with us and with our point of view. However, it's a willing change. They are not being forced to change. They feel that they should change because you and I are the same. Another thing that happens when you affirm someone's belief is you identify their individuality. Now, this has a very positive effect. The moment you make someone feel that they are unique and they are different, they obviously like that attention. They feel inspired by you and your presence because they feel more like themselves, and that you acknowledge that they are someone that you really like. Another way to exert influence during negotiations is by using authoritative facts. We can use authoritative facts in order to convince a customer about how a product or a feature is true and beneficial. Customers usually seek unbiased opinions and social proof. Example: customer reviews and feedback have highlighted this particular feature as most likable. This point clearly shows that other customers like something about this product and feature. Therefore, it would encourage your customer to probably initiate the same transaction. Another example could be, this product has been endorsed by so-and-so who is an expert in the field. This immediately tends to make the customer feel more confident about what is being offered. You could also present some research data or any other source that is not of your making. Example: testimonials, case studies, or social media standing. No customer wants to be the odd one out. Now, using this mindset is very beneficial during negotiation conversations. It's a good idea to always tell the customer what other people are doing and that they should not be the odd one out. So, for example, when a new cell phone is launched, everyone goes to rush it because it's the new trend. Everyone buys it. No one wants to be the odd one out. So using this trick will help make a negotiation conversation more easier. Another example could be, say there's someone in your team who does not want to do this training, but the moment you tell them that you have completed it, or your managers have completed it, or your peers have completed it, then that will automatically encourage them to do the training, because otherwise they'll be the only odd one out. Presenting new information. During negotiations, it's very important that we are mindful of how we are presenting new information. Usually when someone says something during a negotiation conversation and you know what they're saying is probably not entirely accurate or maybe completely wrong, you do not immediately say to their face, that no, this is wrong, this is not what is supposed to happen. Because that immediately makes them feel lesser. It might even hurt them. So it is better to present new information very gently so that they feel that you're trying to actually help them and that it is very common to make such mistakes. It is not something specific or nothing is specifically wrong with them. An example would be, never say you did not know that this feature has many faults. What you could say instead is, most customers did not know the problems that this feature gives. So I am not surprised that you did not know either. This will ensure that customers do not become defensive and are more open to accepting new information. Encouraging exchange. It is very important to encourage exchange, and obviously to encourage exchange during negotiations, you need to take the first step. Give something that they desire to inspire exchange. Now what happens is, usually this whole to and fro takes a little bit of practice. It is not about just blindly going and making an offer to a customer. They should really feel that they are getting what they want. So timing is very important. It is not about just giving something away. The moment you take that first step and tell a customer that I am willing to do this for you, they immediately try and reciprocate the favor. They will feel that since you've done something to them, they will feel obliged that they need to do something for you. It is also important to remember that while making such an exchange and while trying to encourage an exchange, if a customer is not happy with something or is not willing to budge or does not seem impressed, don't hesitate to say no. Make the first offer. Price negotiations especially revolve around making the first offer. Take for example, if I'm sitting here, we don't even know a product, we don't even have a product, and I make you an offer, 1,000 rupees, and you want to beat that offer, you would immediately say 900, maybe 800, maybe 750, but I'm very sure you will not go below 750, and we don't even know what the product is. This is the importance of making the first offer. Since I have made the first offer, I know you will not go below 750. But if I say 500, then you could say 400, you could say 300, or probably 250, right? So this is the power of making the first offer. The moment you make the first offer, you gain a great deal of control. It becomes your anchor point for the rest of the discussion. So always try and make an offer that's a little higher than what you would normally expect and what is reasonable. This will ensure that even if the customer does bargain, you will end up in an acceptable range. FAQs technique. This is a very simple technique, but it's very effective. What happens with this technique is that customers tend to be prepared for your negotiation conversation as well. FAQs are frequently asked questions. If you give a handout like this to a customer or you ask him to visit a website which already has some FAQs mentioned, then the customer has enough of knowledge because he's read through all the commonly asked questions. So when he comes to have a negotiation conversation with you, you're not spending a lot of time actually discussing very common things because he already has answers to those questions. So you can focus on the core issues, focus on customer benefits, and focus on coming to agreeable terms. Objections. This is one of the core aspects of negotiations. Objections happen very simply because we have not understood what the customer wants, or we have not yet understood what a customer really believes in. Handling objections is very simple. However, identifying what the objection is the real key. Now I'm sure that you might already have a list of questions or a list of commonly asked objections that you must have been provided with. The first thing you need to do is familiarize yourself with them. Only once you familiarize yourself with these objections can you actually use them automatically or subconsciously. Because usually what happens is when a customer raises an objection, then we spend too much time thinking about what the response is. Objections usually arise when we have not understood what the customer is saying or what the customer really wants. I'm sure you've faced situations where a customer must have raised an objection and you responded to that objection perfectly, but yet the customer just replied saying not interested. This usually happens when we have not been listening to what the real issue is, or maybe the customer has not been telling us what the real issue is. Therefore, it is very important to understand what the real objection is, and a customer not being convinced with your reply to an objection is an indicator that you've not really gotten through to him. So the best thing to do is to take objections in a positive way, especially if they do not respond positively to you handling an objection. That is a clear sign that you've still not got through to them. Another important tip that we could use while handling objections is to sound genuine and use your emotions while responding. Usually what happens is we have an answer already ready in our mind and then we go out and we just read the answer. That is not as effective as actually adding some emotional content to your response. So it is very important that when you're responding, you actually sound genuine. You sound like you really mean what you're saying. Get that emotions in there. Lack of confidence also tends to take the punch out of your conversation. So when you have an objection and if you reply to it without confidence, it will only feel like empty words. So the power is in confidence. So when you respond to an objection, make sure you're responding confidently. If you respond with fear or doubt or hesitance, then it will make the customer feel that the person is not really sure about what they are saying. Signals. Signals can be looked as a sign, something that tells you that a customer is probably interested in what you're offering or not interested in what you're offering. Now, these signs come across to us through different means. They could be body language, they could be excitement, they could be some nodding, they could be some other sign. we have to be vigilant for these signs. It can show that a customer is actually interested and is inwardly committed in some form or the other to whatever you're offering. So these signals have to be looked out for. We should watch out for fake and generic agreement signals. They do not express commitment. Example, that seems it could be helpful. Now the fact that the customer has said seems only means that he's not really sure. So this should not be taken as a confirmed signal. Another example could be, that sounds interesting. Now the moment someone says it sounds interesting, it means they're quite casual and not very excited about whatever you're offering. Another example could be, how does that work exactly? Now, although this question sounds one that tells you that the customer is actually interested in what you're offering, it is not very specific and should not be taken as an actual buying signal. When we hear customers talking of the product as if they already own it, then that can be used as confirmed agreement signals. This means that either the customer has already made up their mind or are close to doing so, which means that the customer in his mind has already bought the product. Example could be, what is the next step? This clearly demonstrates that the customer actually wants to buy the product because he's not interested in having a conversation with you anymore. He's actually interested into getting into the business transaction. Another example could be if the customer says, this feature will help me. Here he's not saying might help me, but he's saying will help me, which means in his mind he's already made up his mind about the fact that this feature is beneficial. Another example could be, this will be a great gift for my wife. Not might, but he's saying will. This will be a great gift for my wife, which means he's already picturing his wife standing with the product. Closing. Closing negotiations is one of the most crucial aspects of the whole negotiations process. It is important to understand that closing means the end of the negotiation conversation. It means you've agreed to something and now you're moving on to the actual transaction. During closing, it is very important to remember that you are as clear as possible about what it is that has been discussed and that you have summarized everything correctly so that you're able to close the negotiation. There are chances that sometimes you might not be able to cover all the points that need to be discussed during a negotiation conversation. So it is important during this juncture to at least cover off whatever you've agreed upon so that things are not forgotten or missed. Another tip that I'd like to give you during negotiations and during closing of negotiations is using the power of silence. The power of silence is a very important tool because it allows the customer that silence to make up his own mind. See, you're going to have a lot of information during negotiation and even during sales. You're going to be speaking a lot and trying and convincing the customer. But you have to give him that silent moment where he is by himself for a few seconds so that he can think over things and finally give you that yes or no. So rather than pushing a customer into agreement, you use silence and let him come up to his own conclusion. Max to max, what would happen is he would probably come back with an objection, but if he comes back with a yes, that means it's a sure go ahead. Sometimes we might not be sure if the customer is ready to close a sale. During such times, we can use a soft close. Here are some examples. This seems to work for you. What do you think? So in this example, we are asking the customer what they really think. It's an open-ended question and it is an open-ended question and encourages a customer to share his point of view. Another example is, we can meet your requirements. Do you want to proceed? Now this question is especially effective when you are not sure about if the customer is ready for the closing of the sale or closing of negotiations. So asking the customer directly if we are meeting his requirements and if he wants to proceed is a good idea. When we are confident that the customer has agreed with us or there is an agreement in negotiation, then we can directly use a final closing statement. For example, shall we get started with the paperwork? Or, are you ready to make your payment? Or, shall I book your delivery date now? So here are some activities that we can do in order to strengthen negotiation skills. Activity 1, negotiating MRP. This is one of the best activities to practice negotiations in daily life. I'm sure that most of you might know that a customer has the right to negotiate the MRP of a product. The next time you go to buy a product or service, get into a negotiating conversation. It is not about you being able to successfully negotiate a price. The point is to keep practicing. And who knows, you might get some unexpected discount as well. Activity 2. Pick any family member, friend, or an office peer. Pick a topic you guys disagree on and try to negotiate some common ground. Activity 3. List down some common challenges you have when negotiating in your current workspace. This does not have to be limited to your products, but could be about everyday situations like leaves, appraisals, better opportunities, etc. Discuss these challenges with your mentors or managers and negotiate solutions. All right, let's chat with an industry expert. I have with me Satish sir, who is the CEO and founder of Athena eLearn. Hello Satish sir.
Hi.
Thank you so much for making time to join us. Would you please tell us a few words about yourself?
Well, by profession I'm a chartered accountant. I've been in the mortgage industry and the credit information industry since the last several decades. And my passion, I want to now give back to the industry what I have learned in these years in the right manner.
That's really amazing. All right, so we specifically wanted you today in this particular section of the module is because we wanted to learn from you. What are some key skills that one needs to have in the whole sales and negotiation section? So my first question to you is, what in your career, what is the most beneficial skills that you've had to effectively negotiate, that you had to learn?
Well, I think I wish I could give it all in one word, but I think there are 3 or 4 characteristics we should talk about, and not necessarily in order of importance. One is empathy. I think you have to empathize with the person you're talking to, whether you're selling a loan or whether you're trying to recover a loan, you need to empathize, and we will talk about that subsequently. The other is knowledge before you go in, and that includes preparing for a meeting or an interview or a selling session or whatever you're doing. You need to be absolutely ready with your facts. If you are ready with your facts, that's half the battle.
Awesome.
The third thing is you need to adapt to a situation. You might be surprised with a situation which might require you to change tracks in terms of what you're doing. And the last I would say here is that every selling or every negotiating doesn't have to be a win for you and a loss for the other guy.
Okay.
You have to find a solution which meets everyone's requirements. Okay. Doesn't mean you don't stay with whatever your products or your policy or your processes are, but at the same time, you've got to find a way to negotiate and sell a concept which at the beginning of the discussion might not have been acceptable to the other person. How do you get to that? And I think that is your success story, really.
That's indeed very enlightening. Thank you so much for that. So, according to you, what is the best way one should learn negotiations?
I think skills like negotiating or selling are very personal in a sense. So, experience of your own, whether you've experienced negotiating or selling or you've actually practiced it, is probably the best way. But by itself, it won't help unless you can identify with the positives and carry them forward, or something that didn't go right, what did you learn from that? But it's all about the word called experiential. If you experience something and you can imbibe that into your future behavior, future career, I think it makes a big difference. So for example, again, if for example you've gone to recover a loan and you've met a situation which was either happy because there's been a birth in the family or somebody's passed an exam, and you reacted in a particular way, you responded in a particular way, you participated in the joy of that family, you experienced a more positive response from the second party that you're talking to. Yeah. Similarly, and this is more difficult, what if you go into a house to recover a loan and you find that there has been maybe a death or an accident or something? Your whole body language, your demeanor, the way you come across, and how do you participate in that sad moment of that family is something that is going to change subsequently the behavior of that family towards you. So your experiences, now you must have done a good job at that point of time, or maybe you didn't. What do you take forward to the next one? So experience, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
And I think if you do that, you will realize that the skills required for negotiating and selling are halfway there anyway.
Yeah. So I guess experience is the most important aspect. Actually applying the knowledge and getting...
Yes, because you can't teach someone negotiating. You can't teach someone communication.
Yeah.
I can teach you how to calculate an EMI.
Yeah.
I can teach you how to calculate an amortization of a loan.
True.
But each person is different.
Yeah.
Now, sitting on top of all of this, I should have mentioned it earlier, is that you must like what you're doing.
Yeah.
You must like dealing with people.
Yeah.
If you hate that, it's going to come across in your body language. And if that happens, you start on the wrong foot.
So I guess if we are passionate about something, we find ways to express it. Cool. Thank you very much for that. So I also realized that based on my little interaction with you, that you're a big fan of the human element. So would you share with us some examples of how this human element and getting that to either a negotiating conversation or a sales conversation, has that helped you?
You're right when you say that I'm a big fan of the human element. Over the years, my mentors have taught me that, and I've learned it from them without being taught that because of the experience that I go through, where I think it's all about how you build relationships. If you're trying to get someone to apply for a loan, you're trying to get someone to repay a loan on time, it's all about the human element, because ultimately, and that goes back to putting yourself in the other person's shoes. Why is it that he's not servicing the loan? Why is it that he's not wanting a loan from your organization? If you understand that element, and that's beyond the manual and the process and the policy, if you understand that element well, then you're on your way. I've experienced this myself, right? So again, if I'm talking to the managing director of a very large company, trying to get him to take a loan, and I'm trying to convince a person who is a government employee who is still at a lower grade, the whole pitch has to be different, the selling has to be different. The product is still the same. I'm still trying to get him to apply for a loan.
Yeah.
But the point is that which soft element are you touching? Which soft element are you nudging? And that's what's going to decide. So for example, if I tell a very, very high net worth individual that your EMI is going to go up by 50 rupees, he won't care. Right? But when I'm talking to somebody for whom every rupee matters that much more because it takes away his savings, his lifestyle, then I need to pitch that story differently. And for that, I think some of the things you talked about in your earlier part of this module about negotiating, understanding, empathizing, preparing, understand all that comes into play. Now it's not something that you can learn negotiating or any soft skill overnight. Sometimes you will learn from your bad experiences also. But that itself is probably one of the biggest takeaways you can have, that learn from what you've gone wrong with at a point of time.
Thank you very much again. I mean, that's very insightful to hear someone with so much of experience actually explaining. And we've, as Sir said, we've covered all these topics in our module. So I'm sure you'd be able to relate to them when we are listening to him speak. So another question, last one for now. Say, assuming you had a time machine, it's a little off topic, but don't mind me. If you had a time machine and you could go back in time, so you went back in time and you met your younger self, what advice would you give him? What would you want him to do differently, if anything?
I'm assuming that's more on the work side and not on the personal side, because that might open up a whole Pandora's box.
For the sake of the module,
let's stick with the profession. So if I had a time machine, the first thing I would do is probably pack a lot of baggage into my time machine.
Okay.
I would take laptops, computers, the internet and all that stuff. Because honestly, when I go back, when we started, we didn't have calculators. We used to maintain accounts registers in physical book form and amortize loans manually. Trust me, now when I look back at it, I wonder how we did it. But I think that laid a very strong foundation for all of us. So I would go back and tell my younger self, boss, get ready for technology. Because a lot of what's happening on technology, forget about calculators and laptops and phones, the mobile phone, that's all now history again. What is coming is things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain and all that. And that's going to change the way we do lending. I would tell him that, look, for example, there's going to be a credit bureau coming up in 20 years, which was not there when I started my career. And that is, the mindset has to change and you have to adapt all the time. The one thing I would tell myself as a final conclusion to this is be humble. Do not believe that you know it all. Because the day you believe you know it all, you've stopped learning, you've stopped growing, and that's the end of your career. So, Satish of today would go back and tell the Satish of 40 years ago, you know 5% of housing finance, I also only know 5%. Because I think that's the motivation, or that's the trigger to learn more. So that's what I would do, and then I'd get into my time machine and come back and not miss something that's happening here. Like India winning a match.
Awesome. So thank you very much for
having
being here with us today. It was truly enlightening to me, and yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. A new beginning. So we've discussed a lot about sales and negotiations, and you have been given a lot of knowledge. Now it's important to realize that this knowledge is only knowledge unless it does not change you. Right knowledge does have the potential to change you for the better. However, it is up to you to apply this knowledge and principles into practice. There is a lot of potential for you to actually assimilate this information into your daily life, into your career, and make sure you get the most out of it. An important thing to remember is you got to be willing to change. The moment you have new information and the moment you start applying them, you will gain a lot of experience. This experience will highlight things about your nature, your personality that are not really helping you. This will demand that you change the way you are, the way you think, the way you look at things. Now, the willingness to change has to come from within you. The one good thing and the one assurance that I can give you, if you change for the better, your career will change for the better, your life will change for the better. The visualization technique. Success begins in the mind, in your imagination. All this knowledge that has been shared with you at this point in time, it is going to be powerless if in your own mind you're not able to visualize your success. We are so used to our negative limiting thinking patterns that we tend to keep thinking the same thoughts every day. We tend to keep thinking like the same person every day. This is more like a self-imposed hypnosis. We need to snap out of it. And the only way to snap out of it is by thinking pictures in your mind that you want, that are desirable. It is just like any other thing. The more you think positive, the more positive you get. The more you think of the future, the more you work towards building your future. So I'm going to share a very simple technique with you that will help you to get into this positive state of mind. The important thing to remember is that being successful in your mind will ripple as success in your life. So here's an activity that I would like you guys to do. Write down 5 things that you would want to achieve in the future. You do not need to be extremely precise. However, you can be as precise as you're comfortable. Well, for example, you could say, I want to become a manager by next year. Or, I want to achieve my sales target every quarter. Or, I want to be successful at sales and negotiation. Now, I'm sure you recall the activity at the start of the session where we relived our past successes. Try and remember those feelings and practice feeling that success while imagining your current ambitions of the future. Every day, either when you wake up in the morning or before you go to bed, or whenever you have some alone time, imagine in your mind what you actually want. Play around with this idea as if it is actually real. Believe it as if you can actually really see and feel yourself there. This is one of the most powerful activities I have ever encountered. 90% of the time, eventually, you will manifest what you write down and what you think about and dream about every day. This is more like wishful thinking. However, what happens is, this is just like what I said, it's a self-imposed hypnosis. You put yourself into this mindset where all you're thinking about is your future goals and dreams. As you keep thinking about these things, you will get ideas and intuitive leads to act upon. So this brings us to the end of this module of sales and negotiation. I hope you found resonance with whatever has been taught to you. It's been our goal to keep things simple and present information to you such that you can apply it practically. Success is not a straight line, so always remember that as you keep applying the knowledge that's been shared to you, there will be ups and downs. It is not a direct line. But the important thing to remember is that you need to be persistent and not give up. So thank you very much for your time.